Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee-ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in volume 11 of our book series, titled The Realms of Existence. We're going to be in chapters 61 through 70 today, where what I do in this program is I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read a chapter. Then I'll share some teachings on that. Then we'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. If you're interested in asking questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, and I'll be able to see that. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then I'll be able to answer any questions that you have. And if you're interested in reading the chapters, you can actually electronically raise your hand in Zoom as well, and then unmute your microphone, and you'll be able to read, so that then afterwards I'll be able to share a little bit of teachings on that topic and then open up to any and all questions that you guys have. So is there anyone in Zoom who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Okay, it looks like Vibhav. Go ahead, sir.
Chapter 61, Causes of Ill Will. By what fetters, sir, are beings bound? Gods, humans, asuras, nagas, gandharvas, and whatever other kinds there may be. Whereby, although they aspire to live without hate, harming, hostility, or ill will, and in peace, they yet live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and with ill will. Ruler of the gods, it is the bonds of jealousy and material gain that bind beings, so that, though they aspire to live without hate, harming, hostility, or ill will, and in peace, they yet live in hate, harming one another, hostile, and with ill will. But, sir, what gives rise to jealousy and material gain? What is their origin? How are they born? How do they arise? Owing to the presence of what do they arise? Owing to the absence of what do they not arise? Jealousy and material gain, ruler of the gods, take rise from happiness and sadness. This is their origin. This is how they are born, how they arise. When these are present, they arise. When these are absent, they do not arise. But, sir, what gives rise to being happy and sad? What is their origin? How are they born? How do they arise? Owing to the presence of what do they arise? Owing to the absence of what do they not arise? They arise, ruler of the gods, from craving, desire. Due to the presence of craving, desire, they arise. Due to the absence of craving, desire, they do not arise.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is once again giving us this cause and effect. This is the natural law of karma, helping you to be able to see what are the root causes of any particular thing that's happening in the world. Here he's talking about ill will in one's own mind, where there's bitterness, harshness, hostility towards others. And the Buddha has been asked by this being of what actually leads to this ill will towards others. Even though they're interested in living with peace, what is it that leads to this hostility and hate? And the Buddha says it's jealousy and material gain that leads to that. And then this being says, okay, well, what leads to jealousy and material gain? And then the Buddha shares that it's happiness and sadness. And then this individual, this being says, well, what leads to that? And it's craving, desire, attachment. So essentially what you can develop from this is that it's craving, desire, attachment that leads to ill will, that's the root cause. That in order to get rid of your anger, hatred, and ill will towards others, or frustration, agitation, annoyance, even the slightest dislike towards others, you're going to need to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting, and expecting for things to be a certain way. That's what's going to allow you to eliminate that. And these are part of the fetters, those 10 pollutions in the mind, where sensual desire is the craving, desire, attachment, and then ill will is what arises as as a result of the mind not getting its cravings, desires, attachments fulfilled. So that ill will is going to motivate unskillful conduct, where you might push people away, you might be bitter, harsh, and hostile towards them, or you might start putting your expectations on people. And in this way, you can't live harmoniously with all beings around you. So you need to get down to the root cause of what's producing any of these unskillful aspects of your life and your conduct and the certain aspects of your mind, discontentedness, and the Buddha is helping you to be able to see what that is, because then you can actually eliminate it. You learn this through the Four Noble Truths, but this is another place where the Buddha is helping you to be able to see it in a slightly different way, just answering questions to this individual being. Where the Buddha was kind of documented as having taught heavenly beings, and here this is gods, apparently, that they are saying that he was answering questions to. So this is what was part of the documentation of the Pali Canon, because it's heavenly beings and human beings that can actually make their way to enlightenment. The beings in the heavenly realm are still in the cycle of rebirth. It's not a permanent existence in the heavenly realm, and those beings are going to either need to get to enlightenment to escape the cycle of rebirth, or they're going to be reborn into another existence. So there's documentation in the Pali Canon of the Buddha teaching heavenly beings and here gods, but of course the vast majority of his work was to teach human beings. So knowing that it's craving, desire, attachment, longing, yearning that's causing the ill will, now is all parts of the path, the Eightfold Path, and all the techniques and training that the Buddha is guiding you to understand, is to help you cultivate wisdom and eliminating craving, desire, attachment, which is going to ultimately help you eliminate ill will. And of course, there's techniques that go in and actually help you to actively eliminate ill will. That's loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in your day-to-day life. But just by way of working on eliminating your craving, desire, attachment, it's going to knock down some of your ill will, but you're going to need to actually go in and specifically work with the ill will to eliminate that through loving kindness meditation and practicing loving kindness in your day-to-day life. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to guide you in the elimination of craving, desire, attachment, and how to function as an enlightened being so that your mind can be free and liberated and get to that peace and joy. So any questions here on this chapter, just let me know by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions by just unmuting your microphone. Okay, I see Vip have your hands up. Is that for a question? Oh, okay, that was from reading before. Okay. All right, I don't see any questions online. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 62. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, looks like Yihang. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. One frightened and terrified of death, one not frightened and terrified of death. Brahmin, there are those subject to death that are frightened and terrified of death, but there are also those subject to death that are not frightened and terrified of death. And Brahmin, who are those subject to death that are frightened and terrified of death? Here, someone is not free of lust, desire, wants, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures when he incurs a severe and debilitating illness. He thinks, oh, the sensual pleasure dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave those sensual pleasures. He sorrows, suffers, and grieves. He cries, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This is one subject to death, who is frightened and terrified of death. Again, someone is not free of lust, desire, wants, thirst, passion, and craving for the body. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, oh, this body dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave this body. He sorrows, suffers, and grieves. He cries, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This too is one subject to death, who is frightened and terrified of death. Again, someone has not done what is good and wholesome or made a shelter for himself, but he has done what is evil, cruel, and defiled, unwholesome. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, oh, I have not done anything good and wholesome, nor have I made a shelter for myself, but I have done what is evil, cruel, and defiled, unwholesome. When I pass on, I will meet the appropriate fate. He sorrows, suffers, and grieves. He cries, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This too is one subject to death, who is frightened and terrified of death. Again, someone here is uncertain, doubtful, and unclear about the good wholesome teachings. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, oh, I am uncertain, doubtful, and unclear about the good wholesome teachings. He sorrows, suffers, and grieves. He cries, beating his breast, and becomes confused. This too is one subject to death, who is frightened and terrified of death. These are four subjects to death that are frightened and terrified of death. And Brahmin, who are those subject to death that are not frightened and terrified of death. Here someone is free of lust, desire, wants, thirst, passion, and craving for sensual pleasures. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he does not think, oh, the sensual pleasure dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave those sensual pleasures. He does not sorrow, suffer, and grieve. He does not cry, beating his breast, and become confused. This is one subject to death, who is not frightened and terrified of death. Again, someone is free of lust, desire, wants, thirst, passion, and craving for the body. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he does not think, oh, this body dear to me will leave me, and I will have to leave this body. He does not sorrow, suffer, and grieve. He does not cry, beating his breast, and become confused. This too is one subject to death, who is not frightened and terrified of death. Again, someone has not done what is evil, cruel, and defiled, unwholesome, but has done what is good and wholesome and made a shelter for himself. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, indeed, I have not done anything evil, cruel, and defiled, unwholesome, but I have done what is good and wholesome and made a shelter for myself. When I pass on, I will meet the appropriate fate. He does not sorrow, suffer, and grieve. He does not cry, beating his breast, and become confused. This too is one subject to death, who is not frightened and terrified of death. Again, someone is certain, doubt-free, and clear about the good wholesome teachings. When he incurs a severe and debilitating illness, he thinks, I am certain, doubt-free, and clear about the good wholesome teachings. He does not sorrow, suffer, and grieve. He does not cry, beating his breast, and become confused. This too is one subject to death, who is not frightened and terrified of death. These Brahmin are four subject to death that are not frightened and terrified of death. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here we have the words of the Buddha. That's what you have in each one of these chapters. And then you have this reference that goes back to the original source teachings to be able to see where this came from in the Pali Canon. But then you have words from each that are going to help you to be able to integrate this into your day-to-day life, because the Buddha teaches very clear, very concise, and very precise, but it helps to have a dedicated practitioner and dedicated teacher kind of guiding you through, and that's what these words are for. And I bring you to this because what this does is it summarizes what the Buddha is teaching you, that an individual is going to fear death when they have craving for sensual pleasure, meaning that they're longing, yearning through their eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself for pleasantness. This is their longing for conditioned pleasant feelings, and this is what the unenlightened mind does. Or someone who has craving and desire, who's attached to this physical body and they're not interested in leaving it, right? They're not interested in leaving all these material possessions, which is number one. But number two is they're not interested in leaving this physical body. They're craving this permanent existence. But then also someone who's done unwholesome things in the world and they've been cruel or evil to other beings. They know that, oh my goodness, I'm about to die, and now this individual's frightened or fearful of death. or they have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha because they haven't learned deeply the natural law of karma. They haven't seen the truth for themselves. They haven't cultivated wisdom. So because of that doubt, they die confused. They die with this sorrow and suffering and grief coming into the mind, and they have this fear of death. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't have any fear of death. And even prior to enlightenment, you will have already eliminated your fear of death. And what leads to not having fear of death, which is what you would be interested to be able to do, is not have craving, desire, attachment for sensual pleasures, where you're longing, yearning, and clinging to all these material possessions, that you're not clinging to this physical body, that you understand these things are impermanent. Not only are your material possessions impermanent, they don't really truly belong to you, that you're actually essentially just renting them. You're a caretaker of all these material possessions. This physical body is the same way. It doesn't truly belong to you, that at some point the mind's going to separate from this body, and as long as you cling to it and you're clinging to these material possessions, it's going to be very painful as you get closer and closer to death, realizing that you have to leave this. So you would like to train your mind to eliminate the craving and clinging to these things while you're in life, so you can get free and liberated. And then as you get close to death, you won't fear death because your mind has already let these things go. And then likewise, if you're doing wholesome things in the world, you're not conducting yourself in evil, cruel, and unwholesome ways, then you'll know that, I haven't done anything unwise or unwholesome for so many years. As you're getting closer to death, you don't have any fear about what may or may not happen next, because you know that you've done a lot of wholesome things in the world. And then if you have free of doubt, where you don't have any doubt any longer, and you understand these teachings, you've independently verified them, and you cultivated the wisdom about them, then you know what will transpire at death. In terms of whether you're enlightened or unenlightened, you will have an understanding of these things, that you won't be fearful of what may or may not happen to you next. So I go on here and help you to be able to understand this as part of this teaching. And this is where it's really wise to read these books either before or after class, because it gives you a chance to understand them in detail along with the words of the Buddha, which are very central to your growth and development on the path to enlightenment. Because enlightened beings do not have any fear of death. Their mind is completely comfortable with death. They understand that this body is impermanent, this life is impermanent. They're not clinging to this life. They're not clinging to material possessions. They're not clinging to anything whatsoever. And they understand impermanence. So that's what you would like to be able to get to. And one of the teachings that the Buddha helps you to be able to accomplish this, among all the others, is the reflection of death, or contemplation of death, where you sit down and you close your eyes and you think within your own mind that you've actually died, and you kind of convince your mind that you've actually died, and you play that out for 10, 15, 20 minutes within your own mind, and you might grieve and you might be sorrowful. It's almost like you're on a fly on the wall looking at your own funeral and kind of what transpires from that point forward. And you would like to be able to do that for a sequence of events and various times that you've done this, maybe over multiple sessions, so that you can get to the point where there's no grief, there's no sadness, that you've come to terms with your own death. Because death is going to come visit you. Whether you're interested in that occurring or not, it doesn't matter. Every single one of us has to die. And death is kind of like waiting in the corner, and it can either sneak up on you and catch you by surprise, or you can say, hey, I see you waiting in the corner over there, and I know you're going to come visit me someday. So instead of waiting for you to come sneak up on me and surprise me, I'm going to come visit you. And that's what contemplation of death or reflection of death is that you're confronting your own death, where oftentimes people want to avoid thinking about this, where what you would like to do with contemplation of death is actually think about your own death. Not that you're planning it out, not that you're aspiring to die, but you're just coming to terms with the fact that this existence is not permanent, so that you can play that out, so that by the time you get to death, your mind's fully prepared for that, because you've already played it out in your mind, and you're not clinging to material possessions, you're not clinging to this body. You know that you've been doing wholesome things, and you're fully aware and have wisdom of the teachings of the Buddha, and you don't have any doubt any longer about these teachings. And that's going to allow you to have a very peaceful death. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Remember, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like, Richard, are you trying to ask a question there? I see your physical hand.
Okay, yeah, apologies. I don't know how to put up the yellow hand. But I was interested there with the thing about the physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I can't get an exact answer, but where do we go? How far do we go with looking after ourselves as we get older? How far do we go to looking after our body?
Yeah.
Without sort of stepping over that line of clinging to the body. Mm-hmm. Are there any sort of directions within the Pali Canon, or is it just a personal thing?
The Buddha doesn't speak specifically, but his teachings apply here of the middle way, right? Where if you were like clinging to this body and worried about every little, blemish on your skin and every little pimple and wrinkle and every little gray hair, that would be craving and clinging to the body. But if you were on the other side where you could care less of what happens and you're just eating whatever food comes across your eyes and you weren't ever doing any kind of exercise or you weren't getting any health checkups and things like this, that's the complete other side of this, where you would like to be in the middle, where you're able to understand that you're not going to cling to this body and worry and have anxiety and stress when there's certain physical changes that are occurring, because this body will change. But you're also not on the other side where you're completely indifferent and could care less. You'd like to be in the middle where you're making wise decisions to care for this body in terms of what you eat, in terms of whether you have physical exercise and how much of that you do, whether you have physical checkups with doctors and stuff like that. That is all wise things that some of those things didn't even necessarily exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he didn't really comment on these things, but we know today that it's wise to do these things, and you'll need to be able to do that without any craving and clinging. Whereas like if you went to the doctor and the doctor comes in and let's just say they're joking with you and they're like, well, I have some bad news. And if you got worried right away and you were like, shocked by that, you could see that your mind is clinging to this body and you're wanting this permanent health. And maybe they say, well, the bad news is that you're not going to be needing to come see me for another year or two, right? Because you're quite healthy, right? And maybe they're joking with you, but you can see in that situation, like, oh my goodness, the mind kind of jolted there for a second. And this is the way that the mind's mindfulness or awareness of mind, you can observe what's going on in your mind in these situations to see if there's any craving or clinging. So coming to the middle with wise decision making is what you would like to be able to do, and look at your life and see if you feel that you're balanced in terms of what you eat. Your intake's very important, whether you're getting exercise or not, how much of that you're doing, and whether you're doing medical checkups and things of that nature. Those are all wise things to be able to consider to do in order to care for this body.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, looks like Vibhav might have a question. Go ahead, sir.
This is just a follow-up to what Richard is asking. So, and these days there's a lot of checkups that are recommended by the doctors. Like when you turn 50, you get your colon tested, your this tested, that tested. I mean, there's just a lot of, I guess they're trying to be a little bit preventative, but also it seems kind of excessive amount of body checkups that are being prescribed these days for every little thing, right? And so I guess the question is, what is the middle way there that actually... So can I just talk? I'm talking. Yeah, so there's a lot of these additional tests that are being prescribed every day, that when you turn 50, you get these 5 tests done. These 3 other tests done, get tested for cancer, get tested for colon, get tested for 5 other things. So it just seems a little bit excessive, more than just the annual health checkup that most people go through, especially when you turn 50 plus and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is where you'll need to look at it and decide for yourself, because each situation's a bit different, where sometimes certain illnesses run in families because they can be genetic, biological illnesses, and you might need to pay a lot more attention to that. Like in my wife's family, her mom had diabetes, so that's something that she's going to need to pay attention to, where I don't have any history of diabetes in my family, so I don't really need to pay attention to that kind of thing. So you need to get to a point where your mind feels comfortable that you're not just following the expectations of people that are telling you what you should or shouldn't do. You need to be able to come to a decision yourself. So I remember growing up as a kid, we were always taught to go to the dentist once a year, and that was kind of like a cleaning and checkup, and that was the thing. And then at some point people started saying, oh, you need to do it every 6 months, right? And that was when things kind of changed, and I started doing it that way when I had medical insurance. But now that I'm in Thailand and I don't have medical insurance, and it's actually quite inexpensive here to get a dental checkup, I went back to once a year. And that's completely comfortable with me. I haven't noticed any kind of cavities. Since I've been here in Thailand, there hasn't been any kind of excessive cavities. And that once a year seems to be working just fine. So even though, medical professionals will tell you once every 6 months, for me, once a year is working out just fine at this point in my life. So you need to throttle that and see what works best for you, and then monitor it, right? If I started noticing I was starting to get regular cavities, then maybe I might increase this. Because sometimes what's behind some of these recommendations could be potentially the greed of a medical professional, that maybe they're looking for excessive amounts of money, and maybe they're trying to increase their profit and their bottom line. So you need to factor those kinds of things in. And that's where each individual person needs to get to a middle way that they feel comfortable with. They've got their eye on the ball, and they've got enough assessments and enough input from these tests to feel like that they're monitoring their health and they're making wise decisions. And each individual person is going to have different variables based on their family history and based on their own personal history of what they're experiencing, their income level, where they live in the world, and all these things. Each person's going to need to decide these things for themselves, taking into account what the medical professionals are sharing with us, but not just adopting blindly what it is that they're sharing with us, that we come to our own conclusions that we feel comfortable with. Okay, let me check if we have any questions here on Facebook or YouTube. I don't see any there. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 63. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Richard.
Rare that one obtains the human state. Monks suppose that this great earth had become one mass of water, and a man would throw the ring with a single hole upon it. An easterly wind would drive it westward, a westerly wind would drive it eastward, a northerly wind would drive it southward, a southerly wind would drive it northward. There was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? That blind turtle come to the surface once every 100 years, insert its neck into that ring with a single hole. It would be rare, venerable sir, that the blind turtle come into the service once every 100 years would insert its neck into that ring with a single hole. So to monks, it is rare that one obtains the human state, rare that a Tathagata, an arahant, a perfect enlightened one arises in the world. Rare that the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. You have obtained that human state, monks. A Tathagata, an arahant, a perfectly enlightened one has arisen in the world. The teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
All right. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. It looks like Vibhav sent you a chat here in the chat, if you can see that, about how to raise your hand electronically. Thank you, Vibhav, for that. So we're in this section of the book of the realms of existence. It's all about the human realm. And one of the things that the Buddha is sharing in this particular teaching is how rare it is to come into this human state. And he's giving this great analogy that the whole world has become flooded. Somebody threw a ring on the surface of the earth, and the wind's blowing this ring all over the place. And now there's this blind turtle that comes up for air once every 100 years. And what's the likelihood that that turtle is going to insert its neck into that single hole on the surface of the water? And of course, it's very, very rare, coming up once every 100 years. And the Buddha is saying that's how rare it is that you get into this human state. And the reason why this is important for you is that you're not interested in allowing this life to go to waste. You're not interested in it being complacent. And that's what the Buddha is saying down here is like, hey, to his students, he's saying, hey, that there's a Buddha in the world. That's what a Tathagata is. And this individual sharing the teachings, and they're proclaiming the teachings, and their teachings are shining in the world. So therefore, make an effort to understand the Four Noble Truths, That's what this is right here. Because that's the breakthrough. That's the very first teaching, the very beginning of the path to enlightenment, is to understand the problem in your mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. So now, with you understand, like, wow, there must have been some really wholesome karma that you generated in the past, in your past lives, to be able to get to this human state. It's very rare. Let me not allow this life to go to waste and be complacent. Let me apply effort, not only to learn the Four Noble Truths, but to learn all the other teachings too, and train the mind to get to this enlightened mental state, because then you can escape this constant difficulties and struggles that you experience in the unenlightened state over and over and over again. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't have those difficulties and struggles. But of course, in the unenlightened state, there's a certain amount of difficulties and struggles that one experiences. But you can overcome that. You can escape that. But not if you don't take it seriously to the point of investigating the teachings, and even starting with the very first teaching of the Four Noble Truths. So this is a great little discourse to be able to help you understand how rare it is that you come into this human state. Also, how rare it is that there is an actual Buddha in the world. We were talking about this last night at movie night, because the movie we were watching was talking about how everybody's a Buddha. And this just isn't true. The Buddha says it many different places in his teachings about how rare it is that a Buddha comes into the world. And you would like to be able to learn and grow and develop on this path, and it's the Four Noble Truths that's going to help you get started with that. So if you haven't learned the Four Noble Truths with me, you can surely do that through the classes, courses, retreats, the videos, the podcast, the book, things like this. I'm actually going to be teaching it tomorrow in the group learning program, which is Sunday at 9 a.m. at the temple here in Chiang Mai, and 9 p.m. online here at home. So you'll be able to learn it live tomorrow if you like. And for some of you guys, that might be tonight, depending on where you are in the world. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter about how rare it is that one obtains the human state. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the next one, which is chapter 64. So someone who would like to read this? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
Beings are few who are reborn among human beings or heavenly beings because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. Then the perfectly enlightened one took up a little bit of soil in his fingernail and addressed the monks thus: "What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Honorable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant compared to the great earth. That little bit of soil is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. So too monks, those beings are few who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn among human beings. But those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of affiliated spirits. For what reason? Because monks there have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the little bit of soil in my fingernail or the great earth? Honorable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant compared to the great earth. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. So too, monks, those beings are few who, when they pass away as human beings are reborn among the heavenly beings, but those beings are more numerous who, when they pass away as human beings, are reborn in hell, in the animal realm, in the realm of ability spirits. For what reason? Because monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of the discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So this is a very similar discourse as the previous one, but just talked about in a different way with a different analogy, where the Buddha is asking his students, what is more, the earth or the soil under his fingernail? And of course they say, the soil under your fingernail is insignificant. It's not comparable to all the soil of all the entire earth. And the Buddha is saying, yeah, it's actually the same way in terms of human beings that are reborn as human beings. It's much more numerous that these beings are born into hell, the animal realm, or the afflicted spirit realm, because they haven't seen the Four Noble Truths. They haven't had the breakthrough. What the Buddha describes as the Four Noble Truths, he describes this as right view. That having right view means that you understand that the problem in the mind is discontentedness. The cause of that problem is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting, the expecting things to be a certain way. The elimination of that is to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment, and then the path forward to fixing this completely is the Eightfold Path. He describes this as right view, where you understand it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. Wrong view would be to blame other people for the feelings and emotions that you experience. And he describes in his teachings, which we've explored already in this program, that if you die with wrong view, you will be reborn into hell or in the animal realm, right? So here he's saying, essentially the same thing, that, hey, it's wonderful that you've been born in this human existence, because most beings, when they're in the human existence, they don't see the Four Noble Truths and they're reborn into the lower realm. So take this opportunity to really penetrate into the Four Noble Truths so that you don't actually experience rebirth into the lower realms. Now remember, the Buddha never uses rebirth as a way to guilt, shame, or fear you into learning his teachings, or he doesn't use it as a carrot to incentivize you to learn his teachings to be reborn in the heavenly realm. He's interested in you getting to peace and joy in this life. That's what the enlightened mental state is. But he's just explaining true reality of the way that this natural law of Dhamma works, that if you die with wrong view, you will be reborn into the hell realm or the animal realm. And once there, it's like a prison where it's very challenging to get back out of that. So now that you're in this human state, it's important not to allow it to go to waste and to be complacent. And the Buddha is essentially helping you to be able to draw that understanding through what he's sharing with you about how rare it is that you're in this human state. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 65. Now we're moving into the section of heavenly beings, since we've moved through all the others sections. This is the last realm of the heavenly realm. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Yihang.
The three surpassing respects of the heavenly beings. Monks, in three respects, the heavenly beings surpass the people of Uttarakuru and the people of Jambudvipa. What three? In heavenly lifespan, in heavenly beauty, and in heavenly happiness. In these three respects, the heavenly beings surpass the people of Uttarakuru and the people of Jambudvipa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So now the Buddha is starting to introduce you into understanding these beings in the heavenly realm, because it's helpful as part of your journey to enlightenment to understand what these realms are and the qualities that one experiences in these realms. You'll come to understand that the heavenly realm is not a permanent existence. The lifespan in the heavenly realm is very long comparative to human realm. I've seen some discourses where the Buddha describes heavenly existence as long as 500 eons. And he describes one eon as an immeasurable amount of time, because during his lifetime, the highest number they could count to was 999,999, because they didn't have the 1 millionth place during his lifetime. So anything past that number would have just been an immeasurable amount of time, because they didn't have the ability to count that high. So 500 eons would be a minimum of 500 million years to be in the heavenly realm. So the lifespan there is very long. And he's describing how heavenly beings are beautiful and that they have this heavenly happiness, because you'll see in his teachings that heavenly beings experience exclusively pleasant feelings. They experience conditioned pleasant feelings. They don't experience the painful ones, and they don't experience the neither painful nor pleasant. And this is why they tend to be complacent and they don't get to enlightenment in the heavenly realm. So being reborn in the heavenly realm is not an ideal existence, because you're still in the cycle of rebirth. You still need to get to enlightenment, and you tend to lack motivation and enthusiasm to be able to make your way to enlightenment. We're here in the human realm because we experience painful feelings, which we don't like in the unenlightened state, and we experience the neither painful nor pleasant feelings. We tend to have built-in motivation. So here is just a little bit of an introduction to some of the qualities that are experienced in the heavenly realm. And this is just information that you can have and understand that this isn't necessarily going to help you get to enlightenment in terms of eliminating discontentedness, but it can help you to understand that the goal here is not to get to the heavenly realm. And you're going to see that through a collection of discourses that the Buddha is ultimately going to share with you in this section of this book. So let me know what questions you guys have. It looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I had I guess not putting this to this chapter, but like a side question on heavenly beings. Like you said before that the heavenly beings could go back down to hell, so or afflicted spirit or any other realm. Like what would cause that kind of change in like the realm that would, or what would somebody have to do in hell, heavenly realm to like go back to hell, or animal afflicted spirits? I mean, human, maybe it's understandable they become complacent and they still have some cravings and they go down, but if you, to get to the heavenly realm, as been described in the discourses before, that you have to have certain, your brain has to be developed in some way to make your way through, like even you have to go maybe to the, you have to basically have some development of your mind to be able to make it to the heavenly realm. So what would cause them to like do something in heavenly realm that would get them back into like hell or animal or afflicted spirits?
Sure. It's all the same natural law that you're learning that is here in the human realm. It's the same natural law that's affecting beings in the heavenly realm. And you need to be able to think of each one of these existences as a new existence. So let's just say somebody was in the human realm, and let's just say that they made their way into the jhanas through learning and practicing these teachings. And then because of the improvement to the quality of the mind, they were reborn into the heavenly realm, because that's a possibility. And even not even being in the jhanas, you can still be reborn into the heavenly realm. And now let's just say from the heavenly realm, this individual doesn't have right view. Let's just say they have wrong view. That's going to lead them to rebirth in hell or the animal realm, because each one of these existences is a new existence. And while craving and residual memories can move from one life to the next, it's not that 100% of your memories from a previous life lead to the next life. And it's not that your mind is starting off at the exact same place where you left off in your previous life. So even though an individual might have established right view to a certain degree in a human life, say they were in the jhanas or short of that, and they were reborn into the heavenly realm, now in this new existence in the heavenly realm, they can have wrong view. So there's things like this and all the other things that the Buddha teaches that leads to rebirth in the hell realm or the animal or afflicted spirit realms. It's the same things for the beings in the heavenly realm as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to see if we have questions anywhere else. And I don't see any. So let's move to chapter 66. Is there someone who would like to read this?
Could read it.
Okay, go ahead, Vibhav.
By reason of righteous conduct. Master Gotama, what is the cause and condition by why some beings here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappear in states without basic necessities, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, even in hell? And what is the cause condition by some beings here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappear in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world? Householders, it is by reason of conduct and not in accordance with the teachings, by reason of unrighteous conduct, that some beings here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappear in states without basic necessities, in an unhappy destination, in perdition, even in hell. It is by reason of conduct in accordance with the teachings, by reason of righteous conduct, that some beings here, on the dissolution of the body after death, reappear in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. We do not understand the detailed meaning of Master Gautama's spoken words, which he has spoken in brief without explaining the detailed meaning. It would be good if Master Gautama would teach us the teachings so that we might understand the detailed meaning of the spoken words. Then, householders, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Householders, there are 3 kinds of bodily conduct that are not in accordance with the teachings, unrighteous conduct. There are 4 kinds of verbal conduct not in accordance with the teachings, unrighteous conduct. There are 3 kinds of mental conduct not in accordance with the teachings, unrighteous conduct. Householders, there are 3 kinds of bodily conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct. There are 4 kinds of verbal conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct. There are 3 kinds of mental conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct. The detailed meaning at chapter 14, 10 courses of unwholesome karma deposited in hell. In chapter 45, 10 courses of wholesome karma deposited in heaven of this book. If householders, one who observes conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct, should have the objective, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of well-to-do nobles. It is possible that on the dissolution of the body after death, he will reappear in the company of well-to-do nobles. Why is that? Because he observes conduct that is in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct. If householders, one who observes conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct, should have the objective, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of well-to-do Brahmins, in the company of well-to-do householders, in the company of the gods of the heaven of the 4 great kings, in the company of the gods of the heaven of the 33, the Yama gods, the gods of Tusita heaven, the gods who excite in creating, the gods who wield power over other creations, the gods of Brahma's company, the gods of radiance, Lord of limited radiance, the gods of limited radiance, the gods of immeasurable radiance, the gods of streaming radiance, the gods of glory, the gods of limited glory, the gods of immeasurable glory, the gods of refulgent glory, the gods of great fruit, the Aviha gods, the Atapa gods, the Sudasa gods, the Sudasi gods, the Akanita gods, the gods of the base of infinite space, the gods of the base of infinite consciousness, the gods of the base of nothingness, the gods of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. It is possible that on the dissolution of the body after death, he will reappear in the company of the gods of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Why is that? Because he observes conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct. If householders, one who observes conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct, should have the objective, that by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, experience, I might here and now either enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. It is possible that by realizing for himself with direct knowledge experience, he will here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taints. Why is that? Because he observes conduct in accordance with the teachings, righteous conduct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So you're going to get a whole collection of teachings here in this section where the Buddha is helping you to be able to see what leads to rebirth in the heavenly realm. You shouldn't take his teachings describing this as that's the ultimate goal, because he makes it very clear that that's not the ultimate goal, but he's just helping you to see this cause and effect so that you understand the way things truly, really actually work in the world. He's explaining the natural law of karma. And as you see here, that during his lifetime, they believed in multiple different gods. And that's what he's teaching here. So sometimes people think that the Buddha never taught about God, but he did. He didn't put God at the center of his teachings. It would put you at the center of his teachings, but he does teach about this being. And he's essentially, God is associated with the heavenly realm, so that's why he's describing this here. So what we were just describing when I was talking with Vibhav, that it's the same natural laws that apply to human beings, that apply to animals and heavenly beings and all these different realms. We're all experiencing the same natural law, and that's what's causing rebirth and where you're actually being reborn based on this natural law. So the more you gain wisdom of it, the more you'll understand what's actually occurring. So here it's just giving you some insight into what's causing rebirth into the various realms, and it's the wholesome and unwholesome dhamma generated from our decisions in our mind. That up here where the Buddha is talking about the 10 different types of unwholesome moral conduct and the 10 different types of wholesome conduct, it's not the conduct itself that is producing the rebirth, because there's no being that's overseeing the conduct and judging us whether we're going to go to a good place or a bad place. It's that this moral conduct is being generated by whatever's going on in your mind. If you have significant amount of pollutions in your mind, you're going to have unwholesome moral conduct. And if you've reduced or eliminated the pollutions of your mind, you're going to have wholesome moral conduct. So it's the status of your mind at the time of death that's going to determine where you're actually reborn, or if you're even reborn at all. Because if the mind's completely purified, there's not going to be rebirth in the cycle of rebirth. So it's not the conduct itself, but the conduct itself is like a window into understanding what's going on within the mind and the levels of pollution in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter 66, by reason of righteous conduct. All right, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 67. Is there someone who would like to read this one?
David, I think Chris has a question in the chat.
Oh, Chris has a question in chat? Okay. Let's see. Chris is saying, does God, great Brahma, as a being share the same definition of a being as was shared elsewhere? I'm not sure what you're asking there, Chris. Does God, great Brahma, as a being share the same definition of a being as was shared? Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. I think you're asking about the 5 aggregates, perhaps, because that's what defines what is a living being, right? So the 5 aggregates are describing a living being, because that's what you need to be able to understand in terms of applying things like the 5 precepts and also other aspects of the teachings of the Buddha, because anytime you harm a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So while we think about hell beings, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings or God as being a being that is in existence, they're not meeting the criteria of the 5 aggregates because they don't have physical form. They have all the other aggregates, but they don't have physical form. And the reason why the 5 aggregates are helpful here in helping you identify a living being is because, for example, like the first precept, the Buddha teaches you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, not to kill, not to take life. Well, you can't kill a hell being. You can't kill an afflicted spirit, and you can't kill God. You can't kill a heavenly being. So the 5 aggregates is describing what a living being is, but these beings in these formless realms, they're still in existence, but you can't actually cause harm to them through things like killing or stealing or sexual misconduct or things of this nature. So that's why they're not really described as a living being, although they are in existence. Okay, there's something else coming in here as well. Chris is saying, sorry, in Transit Now, I think there was a teaching around defining a being in terms of having grasping. Would need to look up the exact wording. Yeah, the only definition that the Buddha gives about a being is he talks about the 5 aggregates. That's what defines a living being. The physical form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and a consciousness. That's what a living being is. They're going to have all 5 of those things. But the beings in the formless realms of hell, afflicted spirits, and heavenly realm, they don't have physical form, but they have all the other aggregates. But you can't actually kill one of those beings, and that's why it doesn't really apply in terms of things like the 5 aggregate or the 5 precepts, because they don't have that first aggregate of physical form. Okay, Vibhav, you have a question?
I did, but I was about maybe it will come later, but the spontaneously born heavenly beings, but maybe we could talk about later.
it's up to you. Would you like me to talk about it now or another time?
So yeah, I mean, so I think I've seen the discourse multiple times before where they talk about like spontaneously born heavenly beings, and I think there's a discourse maybe last week or the week before that it said that we have to understand that there are spontaneously born beings. So I'm just wondering, it seems to be very central to the idea of at least heavenly being spontaneously born, even human beings. And so it's something that needs to be understood, or it's not important.
Yeah, if you have had interaction with heavenly beings or other beings in these formless realms, you can understand spontaneous birth because they're not brought into the world through like the womb of a woman, right? A human being comes into the world through the womb of a woman. That's not spontaneous birth. So I've never witnessed the spontaneous birth of an animal or a human, even though the Buddha refers to it in his teachings. I've never witnessed it myself. I've never witnessed the birth of a hell being, an afflicted spirit being, or a heavenly being, but I can understand that those beings come into the world spontaneously because there's no womb for them to come into the world through. But as long as you understand those kinds of things, that's all you really need to know, because whether you know these things or don't isn't going to lead to the elimination of your discontentedness.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't see any questions anywhere else. Here's one from Ayuli, though, on Facebook. How does afflicted spirit and hell beings die? They basically have a set time frame of life. Hell beings, afflicted spirits, and heavenly beings, they have kind of like a finite lifespan. And when they get to that particular time frame, that's when they actually die. Their life is expired at that point. So it's not like human beings that our body gives out and we die, or an animal's body can no longer support life. In the formless realms, it's just a definitive amount of time. And when they get to that threshold, that milestone, then that existence is over. Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So we'll move on to the next one, which is 68. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Richard, you got your hand working there. Good job.
Having fulfilled and not having fulfilled one's duty towards the ascetics, ordained practitioners. Monks, last night when the night had advanced, a number of heavenly beings of stunning beauty, illuminating the entire Jeta's grove, approached me, paid homage to me, and stood to one side. Those heavenly beings then said, "In the past, Venerable Sir, when we were human beings, monks approached our homes. We rose up for them, but did not pay homage to them. Not having fulfilled our duty, full of regret and remorse, we were reborn in an inferior class of heavenly beings. Some other heavenly beings approached me and said, 'In the past, Venerable Sir, when we were human beings, monks approached our homes. We rose up for them and paid homage to them, but we did not offer them seats. Not having fulfilled our duty, full of regret and remorse, we were reborn in an inferior class of heavenly beings. Some other heavenly beings approached me and said, "In the past, Venerable Sir, when we were human beings, monks approached our homes. We rose up for them, paid homage to them, and offered them seats, but we did not share things with them to the best of our ability and capacity. We shared things with them to the best of our ability and capacity, but we did not sit close by to listen to the teachings. We sat close by to listen to the teachings, but we did not listen to it with eager ears. We listened to it with eager ears, but having heard it, we did not retain the teachings in mind. Having heard it, we retained the teachings in mind, but we did not examine the meaning of the teachings that had been retained in mind. We examined the meaning of the teachings that had been retained in mind, but we did not understand the meaning of the teachings and then practice in accordance with the teachings. Not having fulfilled our duty, full of regret and remorse, we were reborn in an inferior class of heavenly beings. Some other heavenly beings approached me and said, 'In the past, Venerable Sir, when we were human beings, monks approached our homes. We rose up for them, paid homage to them, offered them seats, and shared things with them to the best of our ability and capacity. We sat close by to listen to the teachings and listen to it with eager ears. Some other heavenly beings approached me and said, in the past, Venerable Sir, when we were human beings, monks approached our homes. We rose up for them, paid homage to them, offered them seats and shared things with them to the best of our ability and capacity. We sat close by to listen to the teachings and listened to it with eager ears. Having heard it, we retained the teachings in mind. We examined the meaning of the teachings that had been retained in mind, and we understood the meaning of the teachings and then practiced in accordance with the teachings. Having fulfilled our duty, full of regret and remorse, we were reborn in a superior class of heavenly beings. These are the feet of trees, monks. These are empty huts. Meditate, monks. Do not be complacent. Do not have cause to regret it later, like those prior heavenly beings.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here, what the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand is the importance of generosity, learning the teachings with eager ears and applying them in your day-to-day life, because that's what's going to lead to improvement in this life. And should you fall short of enlightenment and you are reborn, it's going to lead to an improved rebirth in the future. So generosity is training your mind to let go and not have craving, desire, attachment. And when you're learning the teachings, rather than just being on your phone or surfing the internet and doing all these things, sometimes I see this when people come to the temple, and that's your choice if they would like to do that, where they're coming to the temple and they're sitting there on their phone the whole time. They're not listening with eager ears. And even if someone's listening with eager ears, they might not retain it and retain it in their mind. And if they retain it, they might not even practice it in accordance with the teachings. But if you're doing all these things, then this is actually going to lead to improvement in your day-to-day life, where you're practicing generosity, where you're listening with eager ears, you're retaining the teachings, and you're practicing in accordance with the teachings. So that's really important. If you're going to spend the time to go to a temple, if you're going to log into an online class, don't just be surfing the internet and looking at all those other things. That's really a waste of your time. If you're going to go surf the internet, go surf the internet, right? Don't try to allow your mind to be flipping back and forth like this, because you're not really doing the work that you need to do in order to really be able to learn and grow and develop as a human being. And that's what's going to ultimately lead to your enlightenment, is that growth and learning and actually practicing in accordance with the teaching, so that you can gain the wisdom to see the truth for yourself. And then when it's time to surf the internet and do other things, then you do that stuff. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move to this next chapter, 69. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Yihang, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Reappearance in accordance with one's objectives. Monks, I shall teach you reappearance in accordance with one's objectives. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Here, monks, a monk possesses confidence, virtual learning, generosity, and wisdom. He thinks, oh, that on the dissolution of the body, after death, I might reappear in the company of well-to-do nobles. Oh, that on the dissolution of the body, after death, I might reappear in the company of well-to-do Brahmins. Oh, that on the dissolution of the body, after death, I might reappear in the company of well-to-do householders. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the gods of the heaven of the four great kings are long-lived, beautiful, and enjoy great happiness. He thinks, oh, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of the gods of the heaven of the four great kings. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance here, there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the gods of the heaven of the 33, the Yama gods, the gods of the Tuzita heaven, the gods who excite in creating, the gods who wield power over others' creations are long-lived, beautiful, and enjoy great happiness. He thinks, that on the dissolution of the body, after death, I might reappear in the company of the gods who wield power over others' creations. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the Brahman of 1,000 is long-lived, beautiful, and enjoys great happiness. Now the Brahma of 1,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 1,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there, just as a man with good sight might take a gallnut plant or growth that resembles a nut, in his hand and review it. So the Brahma of 1,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 1,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there. The monk thinks, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of the Brahma of 1,000. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the Brahma of 2,000, the Brahma of 3,000, the Brahma of 4,000, the Brahma of 5,000 is long-lived, beautiful, and enjoys great happiness. Now the Brahma of 5,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 5,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared here, just as a man with good sight might take 5 gallnuts in his hand and review them, so the Brahma of 5,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 5,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there. The monk thinks, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in a company of the Brahma of 5,000. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to a reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the Brahma of 10,000 is long-lived, beautiful, and enjoys great happiness. Now the Brahma of 10,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 10,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there, just as a fine beryl gem of purest water, 8-faceted, well cut, lying on red brocade, glows, radiates, and shines. So the Brahma of 10,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 10,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there. The monk thinks, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of the Brahma of 10,000. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and this residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the Brahma of 100,000 is long-lived, beautiful, and enjoys great happiness. Now the Brahma of 100,000 resides, determined on permeating a world system of 100,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there, just as an ornament of finest gold, very skillfully created in the furnace by a clever goldsmith, lying on red brocade, glows, radiates, and shines. So the Brahma of 100,000 resides determined on permeating a world system of 100,000 worlds, and he resides determined on permeating the beings that have reappeared there. The monk thinks, oh, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of the Brahma of 100,000. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the gods of radiance, the gods of limited radiance, the gods of immeasurable radiance, the gods of streaming radiance, the gods of glory, the gods of limited glory, the gods of immeasurable glory, the gods of refulgent glory, the gods of great fruit, the Aviha gods, the Atapa gods, the Sudasa gods, the Sudasi gods, the Akanita gods are long-lived, beautiful, and enjoy great happiness. He thinks, oh, that on the dissolution of the body, after death, I might reappear in the company of the Akanita gods. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again.
Yang, you're almost done. You're doing a great job.
Yes. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He hears that the gods of the base of infinite space, the gods of the base of infinite consciousness, the gods of the base of nothingness, the gods of the base of neither perception nor non-perception are long-lived, long-enduring, and enjoy great happiness. He thinks, oh, that on the dissolution of the body after death, I might reappear in the company of the gods of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. He fixes his mind on that, determined upon it, develops it, these objectives and these residing of his, thus developed and cultivated, lead to his reappearance there. These monks is the path, the way that leads to reappearance there. Again, a monk possesses confidence, virtue, learning, generosity, and wisdom. He thinks, oh, that by realizing for myself with direct knowledge, I might here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and the liberation by wisdom that are tentless with the destruction of the tents. And by realizing for himself in direct knowledge, he here and now enters upon and resides in the liberation of mind and the liberation by wisdom that are tentless with the destruction of the tents. Monks, this monk does not reappear anywhere at all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Yihang. So here, this is a discourse that helps you to be able to see some priorities in your practice. That you would like to develop confidence, that you would like to have this virtue or this wholesome moral conduct, that you actively are learning, that you're practicing generosity, and you're cultivating wisdom. These are 5 qualities that are going to help you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. But for some reason, if you fall short of that, the Buddha is saying, okay, if you have these qualities and you fix your mind on this rebirth in a certain place, that there's the potential that you could be reborn in that particular place. But ultimately, the goal is this last one that he's talking about, is getting to the point where you have reached enlightenment, and at that point, there's not rebirth anywhere in the cycle of rebirth. So confidence is confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community, that you don't have doubt any longer. And the way that you get to that is through investigation and examination of the teachings of the Buddha. Having virtue or good wholesome moral conduct is to practice right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path. You'd like to bring your practice up to that point where you're not causing harm through the way that you interact with people in the world. And that's a really good starting point in terms of your moral conduct to really get you up to that point where you're not causing any significant harm with the individuals around you. And then the learning is that you're actively learning on a consistent, ongoing basis. You'd like to be sure that you're continuing to advance in your growth and development of awakening to the wisdom of these natural laws. And you need to be practicing generosity, where you're giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources. That's going to help train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, the cause of discontentedness. And then be regularly cultivating wisdom, where you don't believe things, but instead you independently verify the truth about the teachings and what they are and how they are applied in day-to-day life. That you're not just intellectually understanding the teachings, but you're practicing them on a daily basis. You need to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life, which includes things like generosity, moral conduct, and meditation. You're going to need to be practicing those things. And slowly but surely, this is going to help you to gain wisdom to be able to independently verify the truth, which leads to this direct knowledge, where you understand through your own experience what is this natural law. And that's what's ultimately going to lead to the liberation of mind or enlightenment, because it's helping you to cultivate wisdom. And should you die after experiencing enlightenment, then the Buddha is saying you're not going to be reappearing in anywhere in these 5 realms in the cycle of rebirth. But what may happen next after enlightenment for an enlightened being, he doesn't declare what happens next for an enlightened being. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. And I suspect one of the main reasons why he did this is because if there is something next, which he doesn't say that there is or there isn't, and let's just say this thing is wonderful and glorious and he described it, well, your mind would just start craving that thing. And now if you're craving this wonderful afterlife, then that means you can't get to a peaceful and joyful life now in the present moment, because you're still longing, yearning for something after this. You need to get to the point where in the present moment, you're completely fulfilled, completely satisfied, that your mind's not longing, yearning for something else. And that's what it means to be able to get to enlightenment, among other things. So the Buddha doesn't declare what may or may not happen next for an enlightened being. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you're so peaceful and you're so joyful. If there is something next, it's either as good as what you're currently experiencing or better. But if there isn't anything next, an enlightened being is like, oh, well, so what? It doesn't matter. You're already experiencing nothing but peace and joy in the current present moment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So let's go to our last chapter for today. This is chapter 70, where the Buddha is going to talk about 8 kinds of rebirth on account of giving and practicing generosity. Okay, looks like Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
8 kinds of rebirth on account of giving. Monks, there are these 8 kinds of rebirth on account of giving. What 8? Here, someone gives a gift to an ascetic or Brahmin, food and drink, clothing and vehicles, garlands, scents and ointments, bedding, dwelling and lighting. Whatever he gives, he expects something in return. He sees affluent Khatiyas, affluent Brahmins, or affluent householders enjoying themselves, furnished and endowed with the 5 objects of sensual pleasure. It occurs to him, oh, with the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in companionship with affluent Khatiyas, affluent Brahmins, or affluent householders. He sets his mind on this, fixes his mind on this, and develops this state of mind. That objective of his, determined on what is inferior, not developed higher, leads to rebirth there. With the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in the companionship with the affluent Khatiyas, affluent Brahmins, or affluent householders. That is what for one who is virtuous, practices moral conduct. I say, not for one who is immoral. The heart's objective of one who is virtuous succeeds because of his purity. Someone else gives gift to an ascetic or Brahmin, food and drink, and lighting. Whatever he gives, he expects something in return. He has heard. The heavenly beings ruled by the four great kings and long lived beautiful and abound in happiness. It occurs to him, oh, with the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in the companionship with the heavenly beings, ruled by the four great kings. He sets his mind on this, fixes his mind on this, and develops a state of mind. That objective of his, determined on what is inferior, not developed higher, leads to rebirth there. With the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings ruled by the four great kings. And that is for one who is virtuous, practices moral conduct, I say, not for one who is immoral. The heart's objective of one who is virtuous succeeds because of his purity. 3. Someone else gives gift to an ascetic or Brahmin, food and drink and lighting. Whatever he gives, he expects something in return. He has heard. 4. The Tavatimsa heavenly beings. 5. The Yama heavenly beings. The Tusita heavenly beings. 6. The heavenly beings who excite in creation. 7. The heavenly beings who control what is created by others are long-lived, beautiful, and abound in happiness. It occurs to him, oh, with the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings who control what is created by others. He sets his mind on this, fixes his mind on this, and develops this state of mind. The objective of his, determined on what is inferior, not developed higher, leads to rebirth there. With the breakup of the body, after death, he is reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings who control what is created by others. And that is for one who is virtuous, practices moral conduct, I say, not for one who is immoral. The heart's objective is one who is virtuous, succeeds because of his purity. 8. Someone else gives gift to an ascetic or Brahmin, food and drink and money. Whatever he gives, he expects something in return. He has heard the heavenly beings of Brahma's gods company are long lived, beautiful and abound in happiness. It occurs to him, oh, with the breakup of the body after death, may I be reborn in companionship with the heavenly being of Brahma's gods company. He sets his mind on this, fixes his mind on this, and develops a state of mind. That objective of his, determined on what is inferior, not developed higher, leads to rebirth there. With the breakup of the body after death, he is reborn in companionship with the heavenly beings of Brahma's company. And that is for one who is virtuous, practicing moral conduct. I say, not for one who is immoral. For one without craving, not for one with craving. The heart's objective of one who is virtuous succeeds because of his purity. These monks are the 8 kinds of rebirth on account of giving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So this rebirth on account of giving, it's not because of the action itself, it's because what it produces in the mind. Because remember, your rebirth, if you happen to be reborn, is going to be based on the status of the pollutions that are in the mind. And by giving and sharing and practicing generosity, it's reducing and ultimately eliminating, along with other things, the craving, desire, attachment in the mind. So with less craving, desire, attachment in the mind, if someone's going to be reborn, it's going to be in an improved destination, perhaps, right? So that's what's actually being described here, is that there's a act of giving which comes from a generous mind, which means there's less craving, desire, attachment. And now because of that, that's what's going to lead to a certain rebirth. But ultimately, the goal is to completely extinguish all craving, all desire, all longing, yearning, and chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting and expecting things to be a certain way. Then the mind can be completely free and completely liberated, no longer holding on and clinging, and that's where the mind will actually experience enlightenment, and you'll be peaceful and joyful always, and there won't be any rebirth anywhere. But the Buddha here is helping you to be able to see that by giving and sharing, it helps to lead to an improved rebirth, but that's not the ultimate goal, but he's just helping you to see this natural law so that you can understand what's actually truly occurring. So it's not the act itself of giving, it's the fact that the act of giving reduces craving, desire, attachment, and now at the time of death, there's less pollution in the mind, and that's what leads to this rebirth that he's talking about here. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay. I'm Not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm just going to end by thanking all of you guys. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn and grow and develop. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, chapters 71 through 80. You can read those ahead of time if you'd like, and then that way you might even have questions in the class, because you'll read the words of the Buddha, you'll read what I'm writing as well, and that might help you to be able to then formulate any particular questions that you might have, because then you'll have clarity on what each individual chapter is. Whereas if you're not reading before or after class, you're not really gaining the full benefit of being able to be involved in a program like this. Tomorrow in our group learning program, I'm going to be in chapter 4, which is titled The Four Noble Truths, Establishing Right View, where you can understand and have the breakthrough of what is the problem in the mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be at the temple here teaching meditation and doing meditation with students, opening up to questions. And then online, I'm going to be doing a first part of a 4-part series of Buddhist chanting. On the evening class for Wednesday, we're going to start a 4-part series on helping students to learn Buddhist chanting. So if that's something you would like to do on the evenings here on Wednesday for the next 4 weeks, I'll be helping students to build up their chanting practice. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.